Coming in at number 10, we have Venom's ability to detect members of his symbiote family. Like many other carnivorous, terrifying alien races from beyond the stars, the symbiotes have something similar to a hive mind that, when utilized, allows Venom to know the general location of any symbiotes that originally spawned from him. And while it's not a perfect ability, given the amount of times that other symbiote villains have been able to block Venom's radar, it's still a pretty unique talent that comes in extra handy every time Spider-Man needs help facing another symbiote threat. Coming in at number 9, we have Venom's power of parasitic inheritance. While the Venom movies have recently made it seem like Venom's similar appearance and abilities to Spider-Man are all just a weird coincidence, the comics make it clear that this was anything but. When the Venom symbiote was originally bonded with Peter Parker, it actually inherited some of his spider-based abilities, meaning that Venom will always be able to create webs and use the wall crawler's powers against him. This also means that if the Venom symbiote infects any other superpowered heroes or villains, it can also gain their powers, which honestly has been pretty underutilized in the Marvel universe so far, with the exception of the occasional what if storyline. Coming in at number 8, we have Venom's matter manipulation. Now, everybody knows that Venom is made of weird, icky goop that he can control. It's kind of his most defining trait, and his initial twisted, melted Spider-Man appearance is still iconic to this day. But did you know that this ability is actually way more powerful than you might think? Whenever Flash Thompson took over the role as the symbiote's host, as Agent Venom, he showcased the ability to use bits of his symbiote essence as a projectile weapon or bullet, and then using his manipulation abilities on the bullet to tear an enemy apart from the inside out. Definitely not the nicest way to take out a villain, but hey, he's still Venom, so you gotta have a little bit of anti in that anti-hero. Coming in at number 7, we have Venom's poisonous bite. That's right, you'd think it would be obvious from having a name like Venom, but this symbiote's fangs aren't just for show. They contain a special form of symbiote poison that's been shown to be even deadlier than that of a snake's. With the teeth on Venom only being developed at Eddie Brock's command, this ability hasn't been showcased too often in the comics, but does make a surprise recurrence every now and then when Eddie needs to get out of a tight situation. In fact, the poison on Venom's bite is so strong that Sandman once lost his ability to hold his form for a time because he was bitten. And this is a dude that's literally made out of sand. Just imagine what teeth like those would do to a regular person, and maybe it's a good thing that Venom often forgets to chew his food. Coming in at number 6, we have Venom's all-natural tracker beacons. Another addition to his moveset during the Flash Thompson / Agent Venom era, Venom didn't need to rely on technology or GPS when trying to track down one of his targets. By using the same ability that allows him to know the location of his offspring, Agent Venom was capable of sticking a piece of his own symbiote self onto others and then track them down as if he'd placed a literal beacon on themselves. It might be crude, low-tech, and a lot goopier than your usual method of tracking, but you really can't argue with the results. Coming in at number 5, we have one of the newer abilities on this list, the power of flight. First manifesting after Eddie and Venom's first encounter with Null, the god of all symbiotes, Venom had apparently been hiding his ability to sprout a pair of blood-red dragon wings the entire time, a symbol of Null's impressive symbiote dragons. However, when you're already capable of swinging, climbing walls, and even breathing in the vacuum of space, the ability to fly just isn't quite as impressive as it would be on a character that was stuck on the ground up until this point. Ah well, giant symbiote wings, you still look rad as hell to me. Coming in at number 4, we have Venom's ability to merge with inanimate objects. That's right, we all know that symbiotes are easily capable of bonding with other organic life forms, whether they be human or alien, but a rarely seen ability of the symbiote race is that they can bond with inanimate objects if the need ever arises for survival. In one particularly notable instance, the Venom symbiote once combined itself with a broken down car car so that it would have a body capable of moving throughout the city, repairing the car with its own tendrils to make it fully operational. Hey, I guess it beats a mechanic's bill. Coming in at number 3, we have Venom's healing ability. Now, healing abilities aren't exactly rare in the Marvel universe, and Venom's can do everything you would expect from the gift. Cuts get healed over, broken bones are fixed in place, and any limbs lost can be easily regenerated. However, there's one aspect of Venom's healing that seems to go beyond that of even Wolverine. When Eddie Brock found out that he'd contracted cancer, the Venom symbiote was able to slow the cancer's spread and eventually healed the entire affliction. Curing cancer? That's definitely outside the realm of usual superhero powers, and something Venom definitely doesn't bring up enough. Coming in at number 2, we've talked about symbiotes merging with inanimate objects, but what about the internet? That's right, in probably the most 90s possible storyline of all time, Venom and Carnage brought their endless back and forth struggle for dominance into the digital age, with this comic making canon that symbiotes can manipulate their molecules to such a tiny degree they can slip into the molecules that make up the internet data stream. Now, I'm not an IT guy, but I'm pretty sure that's not how the internet works. However, if you experience any technical glitches with this video, it's totally because Venom and Carnage are just punching each other in between the pixels of your screen. This power was so weird that it hasn't made a reappearance since, but it definitely is one of the more memorable Venom storylines. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have Venom's most recent power-up, but also potentially his weirdest, with symbiote time vision. Following the defeat of the symbiote god Null, Eddie Brock and his symbiote have taken Null's place as the symbiote leader. With this great responsibility comes a lot of great power, including the ability to not just merge with any symbiote throughout space, but throughout time as well, meaning any symbiote, past or future, can be suddenly seen through the eyes of Eddie Brock. With Eddie initially being completely overwhelmed by the disorienting process, this is a power that may take some time to properly wield, but could just be Venom's strongest gift of all.
Number 10. Spidey tracking. Cindy Moon has a pretty intense connection with Peter Parker. Cindy is a superhero we know as Silk, who happens to be a spider-themed hero herself, who got her powers from a radioactive spider bite as well. The same spider, in fact, as the one who gave Spider-Man his powers. Because of this, they have an unspoken connection which allows Cindy to be able to track Peter to the point that he could be almost anywhere in the multiverse and she'd be able to find him. Granted, this power really only works with the two heroes because they're so closely connected to one another. Still, I didn't even know that was a power that Silk had. I learned that too when I was writing this list. So, yay. Number 9. Perfect balance. If you think you know what great balance is, you probably don't. At least not at the same level of great balance for someone as agile as Spider-Man. For Spider-Man, his ability to balance is insane. This is because Spider-Man has an enhanced equilibrium, and what's even more crazy is in the alternate reality of the MC2 line known as Earth 982, Peter is actually not alone. In fact, in that reality, he's even surpassed by another spider-themed hero, his daughter, Mayday Parker, Spider-Girl, who later becomes known as Spider-Woman. May's equilibrium is even better than her dad's in this universe, meaning that she is more agile and has an even better sense of balance. Which is pretty crazy because Peter can already balance on like pretty much anything on just like the tip of a finger or a toe and do so in almost any position. Number 8. Radiation resistance. It turns out that Spider-Man, having been bit by a radioactive spider, actually gained a semi-immunity to radiation poisoning. Radiation of course can still hurt Spider-Man, but it takes a lot of it to do any significant damage to him. In other words, if you've ever played Fallout and taken some Rad X before heading into a super irradiated area, that's kinda like what we're talking about here. Instead of radiation killing Spider-Man, it usually just leaves him feeling weak. Of course, like anything, if he is exposed to too much radiation, it can do damage and even potentially kill him. So he's not completely immune to it, just not as sensitive as many standard humans are. We're very sensitive to radiation, so take that Rad X and, I don't know, get bit by a radioactive spider, I guess, if you want some protection from it. Or just, you know, avoid it. That's a good way to live life. Avoid radiation. Number 7. Spider Whisperer. One version of Spider-Man can even communicate with spiders. in a way. And okay, maybe not a Spider-Man specifically. For this point, we're focusing on Kane Parker, clone of Peter Parker, initially known for his brooding, violent and villainous ways, and long dramatic hair. Now, however, Kane is a hero in the comics who still is kinda broody, but not as broody as he was originally. During his time as Scarlet Spider, he made an appearance in the 2014 New Warriors series. Here, in issue number 3, we get to see that Kane has a unique spider-based power. That is, he can communicate with spiders. Now, while he can't directly command them to do his bidding, Kane's power does give him a sort of empathic connection to the spiders around him. Still, pretty neat, and honestly seems like a power that should be a thing for all spider folks, even though it is a surprisingly rare one in the realm of the Spider-Man multiverse. Like, I'm surprised that not every spider person can communicate with spiders. Just seems logical, and yet. Number 6. Organic webbing. Oddly enough, this one might be a power that you already thought you knew about, but in most cases, it's actually not a thing. A lot of people think it's a thing when it's not, and then sometimes it weirdly is. I hope that makes sense. Spider-Man's web shooters are actually an invention that Peter Parker, or usually any other Spider Totem of the Week, invented for their own use. Some fans think that this webbing is a part of Spider-Man's power set, but it's standardly a part of his equipment kit. However, this isn't always the case, and there have been a few times in the comics where the webbing for our hero has actually been organic, literally coming out from his own wrists, which is really weird and kinda icky, and not really a thing that we needed, but you know, we got it anyways. Silk is another spider-themed hero which has also had this power set of organic webbing, although in a bit of a cooler vein, at least in my opinion, and in terms of her character design. She also uses her webbing to create her suits at times when she has to jump into action unexpectedly. This gives Silk not only a pretty unique power, but also an unique look too. Number 5. Wicked Smart. I just like saying wicked smart. Or just wicked as an adverb, really. Wicked is a cool adverb. I really love adverbs. Of course, as I said earlier, the reason why people sometimes make the assumption that Peter's webs are always organic when they are only sporadically organic is because they forget just how smart he is. Yes, Peter is sweet, kind, and sometimes teeters on the edge of falling completely apart, but there is more to him than all of that. He doesn't only have a good heart, but he also has a great brain. Hence how he was able to create his own web shooters to begin with, and also hence his love of academics and science. Peter isn't just your average smarty either in the Marvel Universe, no siree. He has been considered one of the great intellectual minds, rubbing elbows with the likes of Reed Richards, Iron Man, Black Panther, and Bruce Banner. Number 4. Venom Blast. Venom Blast is an iconic power that fans of Spider-Man might not be familiar with, but fans of Jessica Drew's Spider-Woman likely will be. Venom Blasts don't actually involve venom either, so the name for this power is kind of a misnomer. However, that didn't stop Spider-Woman from the 1970s cartoon shouting out the name of this power every time she used it. Venom Blast! It's like the louder you shout it, the more powerful it is. The Venom Blast power is actually electrical in nature. Jessica has the ability to produce excess bioelectricity which she can then channel into a blast, allowing her to shock, stun, or even kill her opponents. In fact, this is also a power that Jess has had to practice with and hone over the years so she can avoid killing people with it because it is just that powerful. I feel like that's actually a lot of Jessica Drew's powers. She's like, I have to hone this because it's just too crazy. Practice is important, especially if you have superpowers. Number 3. Magic. At least for a time in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, Peter had this one. For a short time, but it happened. He actually was given the Eye of Agamotto by Doctor Strange for a time and ended up possessing temporarily all the powers of the Sorcerer Supreme. In the Ultimate Spider-Man animated series, Peter also kind of trains with Doctor Strange, or at least hangs out with him, and he gets some immunity to magic from his time spent with the famed Sorcerer. Granted, the magic that Peter has in this series is temporary, but it should also be noted that Spider-Man's origin was actually tweaked in the decade leading up to the Spider-Verse event in the comics, making him actually more mystical just as a character in the main continuity of 616. We learned that Spider-Man's origins weren't only based in the realm of science, but that the bite that he suffered from that radioactive spider was also somewhat fated, and was considered a gift from the spider, or more specifically the Other, which is kind of the spider, the great spider being that Spider-Man is attached to, turning Spider-Man into one of many spider totems throughout the Marvel Universe. Totems are basically figures throughout the Marvel Universe who are connected in a supernatural way to the spirit of an animal. In Spider Totem's case, it's spiders. Number 2. Venom Punch. Okay, so maybe you know about Jessica Drew's Venom Blast, but did you know that Spider-Man is also capable of emitting bioelectricity powers himself? Miles Morales' Spider-Man also possesses the power to channel his excess bioelectricity into blasts and shocking beams of concussive energy. But he also has another unique power he can pull off using his extra stores of bioelectricity. That would be his Venom Punch. Miles the Spider-Man can actually channel his bioelectricity into his punches, basically supercharging them. So not only are you feeling the pain of that super strong punch, because he's also got super strength, but also the pain from electric fists if you get hit by him. Honestly, Miles is probably one of the wildest power sets of all the Spider folks around. He's got lots of cool unique powers and is like crazy OP. Just another reason to love Miles Morales. Number 1. Pheromone powers. Jessica Drew actually possesses these powers, although we might sometimes forget about them. They don't come up very often, and I think that's kind of because Jessica likes to use them sparingly. They are kind of weird powers. Also, it's hard to write powers like these without the issue of consent coming up. They do kind of inherently seem to lend better to villains than heroes because of that. However, one of my favorite moments when it comes to Jessica Drew's aka Spider-Woman's use of these powers is when she partnered with the Hulk and used them to help control and calm him, helping to combat his tendency to rage and hone that in. She proved that she could help take control of the Hulk by influencing him to make her a sandwich, which is pretty harmless and just kind of funny. Also, Jessica kind of shot herself in the foot with that one because the Hulk making a sandwich it's gonna be a bit of a mess of a sandwich. But he tried, he did his best. It was still a good sandwich, Hulk. I give it a thumbs up.
Coming in at number 10, we have Wolverine's particularly powerful sense of smell. Wolverine has always been known for his more animalistic traits, given the whole Wolverine name, but did you know that Logan's sense of smell in particular is almost beyond compare? While all of Wolverine's senses are heightened to the degree that he's become an excellent tracker of prey over his many years as an X-Men, his sense of smell is so powerful that he was once able to deduce that Peter Parker was Spider-Man simply by randomly passing by him on a European vacation. In an even wilder example, the Ultimate Wolverine once had to track down the smell of his own legs after the Hulk had ripped him in two and threw his lower half 4 miles away from the site of their battle. Kind of a dick move, Hulk. Coming in at number 9, we have immunity to adamantium. Now, most comic fans will know that Wolverine had his skeleton entirely covered in adamantium, one of the most powerful metals on Earth by the Weapon X program. But did you know that adamantium is actually incredibly toxic? If it weren't for Wolverine's healing ability constantly fighting off the toxic effects of having this metal throughout his entire body, he likely would have died from the poisonous effects of the experiment decades ago. Anytime that Wolverine has temporarily lost or weakened his healing abilities since joining the X-Men, he's had to rely on antidote pills to ensure that his bloodstream isn't overrun by the toxic chemicals within the adamantium in his body. All of this is to say that while Wolverine's claws may be deadly, they easily could have wound up being just as deadly to him. Coming in at number 8, we have Wolverine's perfect night vision. As I mentioned earlier, Wolverine is well known for his more animalistic traits, such as his hearing and sense of smell, when it comes to being able to hunt down his enemies. But that doesn't mean his eyesight is weak by any means. Although it's more commonly known as an ability of his arch-rival Sabretooth, Wolverine has absolutely perfect night vision, meaning he can see better than most humans can during the day while it's pitch dark outside. Might just be a personal preference, but I really wouldn't want to encounter Wolverine in a dark room. Coming in at number 7, we have Wolverine's memory suppression. That's right, even though it's been a major story point throughout decades of X-Men comics, and particularly the live-action films, that Wolverine's got some amnesia issues, it turns out that this character trait is more of a superpower than just a traumatic backstory. While I'm not sure if the science quite works out on this, apparently all of the holes in Wolverine's backstory aren't the result of an enemy's memory wipe, but rather from Wolverine's healing ability building up scar tissue within the trauma center of Wolverine's brain. Without it, Wolverine's long lifespan and all of the horrors that he's endured over the years would be too much for even a mutant brain to handle, and thus, the amnesia is actually a safety feature from Wolverine's own mutation. Definitely an interesting take on his healing abilities, even if Wolverine probably wishes that his memory was a bit more stable than it has been in the past. Coming in at number 6, we've got another side effect of Wolverine's healing, and that's his relative immunity to telepaths and psychic attacks. All of that scar tissue building up in Wolverine's head over the decades isn't just for blocking out unpleasant memories. In fact, it was revealed that this is the reason that so many villains have had issues controlling Wolverine with telepathic powers in the past. Wolverine's healing ability actually forces out the mental forces attempting to break into his mind, thus letting Wolverine control his own destiny and always being sure that he's in charge of his own body. Coming in at number 5, we have nuclear survival. When Wolverine was first introduced in the comics, his healing ability was just a quirk that made him a more intimidating warrior. Any cuts or bruises would just quickly become a non-issue to him. But as time went on and Wolverine became a more popular character, his healing abilities as a mutant became one of his most defining features, even more so than his iconic claws. Wolverine's healing abilities combined with his indestructible skeleton have been shown to be so great over the years that he's even been able to withstand the full force of a nuclear bomb. Look, comics in the 90s were a little bit over the top, okay? Coming in at number 4, we have Wolverine's animal empathy, a power that was particularly useful during the period of time where Wolverine abandoned his humanity and lived in the woods. While not going so far as to allow him to literally talk to animals, Wolverine is still able to sense and understand the emotions of any animal in front of him, alongside allowing them to understand his emotions as well, getting rid of any danger of fear or miscommunication between him and the usually deadly species he encounters, such as wolves. With abilities such as these, it's not too hard to wonder if Wolverine sometimes can be more beast than man. Coming in at number 3, we have Wolverine's infamous Hot Claws. Following a period of 5 years where Wolverine was canonically dead within the Marvel Universe, asphyxiated by an adamantium prison, it wasn't long before Wolverine was brought back from the dead because, you know, comic books. Resurrected by the mutant Persephone, who aimed to use Wolverine as a puppet, Wolverine's healing abilities allowed him to break free of her control and found his newly resurrected form with a power upgrade. His adamantium claws could now seemingly reach unlimited amounts of heat energy, overflowing with power in Wolverine's new body. These claws made Wolverine's claw attacks somehow even deadlier than before, even if they carried the side effect of limiting the rest of Wolverine's healing abilities. And while they haven't been seen in recent years after becoming a bit of a meme on the internet, who knows if Wolverine will ever be needed to use his hot claws once more. Coming in at number 2, we have Wolverine's mastery of languages. While this probably doesn't count as an actual mutant ability of Wolverine's and is more due to his overall intelligence, Wolverine's healing ability and longevity over the years have definitely helped with the fact that canonically, Wolverine knows at least 18 different languages, the result of an incredibly hectic lifetime throughout the 20th century, and showing that Wolverine is anything but just a violent brute. While knowing Japanese might be expected given Wolverine's history in the region, he also knows everything from Spanish, Italian, Vietnamese, and Russian, just to name a few. Although, honestly, now I just really want to know what the Russian translation of bub is. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have Wolverine's Berserker Rage. For the longest time, Wolverine was seen as a fighter with a temper, and someone you definitely didn't want to fight while he was pissed off. It's eventually been revealed, however, that Wolverine's rages are actually a part of his mutant power set, allowing him to go into a full Berserker mode if he ever feels too cornered in combat. While Wolverine has been shown to despise this aspect of his powers and even seems embarrassed of his rages when they're used for good, sometimes the odds are so stacked against the X-Men that the only way out is for Wolverine to forget everything else and unleash the beast inside.
Okay, at number 10 we have Pain Resistance. Moon Knight, or Mark Spector, has been through a lot over the years, and it's fair to say that he may be the living reminder that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I know what you're thinking off the top. That isn't really a power. Well, a lot of Moon Knight's powers are like this, since Khonshu comes in and out of the stories as a powerful muse for Mark Spector. Some say this is because he was Marvel's response to Batman's success, basically Marvel's Batman, and we all know that Batman is sort of the same way. A guy who doesn't really have any special powers other than what his mortal identity brings to the table. One good example of Moon Knight's pain resistance is in the first run for the character when he crawls through Bora's icy wind. despite the extreme pain, something that even Professor X confirms is causing him so much agony that he can't even fathom this ability. It could be argued that his tolerance to pain could be due to him having died and come back to life, giving him a tougher disposition by way of Khonshu's blessing. Or he's just a badass like that. Okay, at number 9, we've got Weapon Mastery. If you follow Moon Knight's story in the comics, you'll know that his work in the CIA has him training with all sorts of weaponry like batons, brass knuckles, chains, shurikens, as well as guns like pistols, sniper rifles, submachine guns, and grenade launchers, among many others. His background in the CIA and Marines have arguably a more substantial effect on his power set than the event with Khonshu's ghost, which is a pretty cool way for a character to find their power set, if you ask me. At number 8, we have Moon Knight's Super Speed. This is a power that often isn't cited as one of the character's main abilities, but it is something he flaunts again and again. In a few instances, he actually dodges bullets, one time from a number of different automatic turrets firing at him all at once. This is a pretty crazy display of not only speed, but dexterity, being able to move his body like this and doing it while he's flying through the air. In another instance, he actually dodges fire from a lightning spear while he's crammed into a tiny aircraft. And another time when he actually catches a dart fired from a crossbow with ease. This ability comes in hugely handy for this guy because I'm not sure that his speed even relies on the power of the moon. He's just like this. At number 7, we've got Immortality. This is one that many people wouldn't necessarily attribute to Moon Knight because Mark himself has actually died a handful of times. But it seems as though every time this happens, Khonshu is able to revive him without issue. The best demonstration of his tendency to be brought back from the dead is near the end of Moon Knight Volume 3 when he dies. Twice. The first time it seems that he's stabbed and takes a huge fall, but then he's brought back from the depths of the ocean. And the second time he dies right at the end of the storyline, but in the following run comes back again, emerging, or rather exploding, out of Khonshu's tomb. So he's not immortal per se, but he doesn't seem to be capable of being dead for very long before his ancient muse is able to give him another go at life. At number 6 is what's known as Lunakinesis. This entry, and most of what's coming up for the rest of the list, is during a time when Mark is influenced by Khonshu's powers. So he gets some pretty huge power boosts. Lunakinesis is basically the ability to control the different moons in the universe, as well as any objects made out of the moon's materials. This is what actually allows him to take control of Mjolnir in Avengers number 33, which we'll explore more later on in the list. This power is super useful considering for this time he is able to call upon the energy of the moon to imbue him with a plethora of extremely useful abilities. Another power that goes along with this is known as geokinesis, which is pretty much the ability to manipulate any minerals, rock, and dead terra firma that would make up the structure of a moon, or anything considered to be a moon in the universe. So if your planet's moon is made up of mostly titanium, for example, he's going to be able to manipulate titanium by sheer will. Pretty nuts. All right, at number 5, we've got the time that Mark Spector is empowered by Phoenix Force while he's facing off against the Avengers and his former master Khonshu. We all know that the Phoenix Force is one of the most powerful deities in the universe, and it has been used most notably to possess living beings as hosts. But considering how powerful Mark gets when he's taken over by Khonshu, one can only imagine how much of a boost he gets when Phoenix Force is brought into the mix. Actually, one doesn't have to imagine, because in Avengers number 37, we witness Moon Knight taking on Phoenix Force and harnessing the most power he's ever had in his life. He gets so powerful at this point that he just sort of dismisses Khonshu, showing that he doesn't need the Moon God anymore due to his immense power from Phoenix Force, and a few of the Avengers as well. But that's coming up at the top of our list, so stay tuned. At number 4, we've got Moon Knight's ability for self-sustenance. Maybe this is one that you already know, but it's another power that often isn't associated with Moon Knight's typical power set. While he's imbued with Khonshu's power, Mark Spector is actually able to live in any atmosphere without needing oxygen. This allows him to travel into the cosmos without the need for a breathing mask or a ship with a pressurized cabin. He makes use of this power when he travels to the moon, to encounter Thor in a pivotal moment in Moon Knight's trajectory as a character. It's an ability that is widely underrated for this character, but allows him to reach his full potential when he faces off against the Avengers, mentioned previously on this list. At number 3 is Moon Knight's telepathic resistance. This is a great ability, and it's actually attributed to the character's struggle with mental illness, and more specifically his multiple personality disorder. This is clear in West Coast Avengers Volume 2, issues 30 and 36, when Moon Knight is working with the Avengers and notices that he's the only one whose mind hasn't been taken control of. He attributes it to the fact that he's grown strong over the years dealing with his own struggles with mental intrusions from the moon god Khonshu. He even notices that Vision's mind has been taken over, and for an android to have his mind taken over, it just proves how strong Moon Knight's mind defense has become. Mind defense. Is that a good way of putting it? Anyway, you know what I mean. But considering he's got a number of other voices always speaking to him from within, he seems to have enough going on up there that his true mind, his reasonable mind, stays intact when mind control is tried on him. Alright, at number 2 is Moon Knight's formidable martial arts skills. I never use the word formidable, but I'm gonna use it now because the range of his fighting ability is just formidable. And I know we all know that Moon Knight can fight, that's obvious. But many people don't realize that it's one of his most notable and important powers, because sometimes he can't rely on the power of the moon or Khonshu's influence to get the job done, and he needs to go back to his roots as a trained CIA fighter. Did you know that Mark Spector, without even being under the influence of Khonshu, knows Muay Thai, Kung Fu, Eskrima, Krav Maga, Dambe, Savate, boxing, Silat, Filipino martial arts, judo, karate, and ninjutsu. But what's most impressive is how he employs these techniques throughout his different runs in the comics. His training in martial arts is even arguably all that keeps him alive in tough times, like when he's badly injured in the pre-Vengeance storyline, rendering him weaker and slower than ever before. Probably the best place to look for his wide array of fighting abilities will be in the current run, first published in 2021 and being released as we speak. In this modern publication, Moon Knight is back to being brutal, and when not pulling his punches when facing off against his enemies. Moon Knight is back to being brutal, and really not pulling his punches when facing off against his enemies. Okay, at number 1 is Power Absorption. This ability allows him to steal powers from other, extremely powerful superheroes in a few different instances. In Avengers number 33, Moon Knight is on a tear, taking on a number of Avengers with an army of undead on his back. He starts off by taking the immortal Iron Fist's powers and encapsulating them in an ankh that he wears around his neck. Then he travels to the Sanctum Sanctorum to steal Doctor Strange's powers, also storing it in the ankh necklace. He tries this again with the Black Panther, but is unsuccessful. Not beaten, just unsuccessful in taking his powers away. So then he runs into Thor on the moon, which we mentioned earlier, and not a great place to run into the agent of Khonshu. Basically, he steals Mjolnir from Thor, which shows that this guy can basically render the Avengers useless, at least as long as they're apart. It's a pretty crazy feat for Moon Knight and shows off a power that some may not know he possesses.